House Ways and Means Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the House Rule 67 and the Governor's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. This is a work session and possibly executive session. Please note that there is no physical location for members of the public to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with emergency order, I am confirming that all members of the committee and select legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom electronic meeting platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting by the Zoom platform or by telephone. All necessary access information has been made available in the House calendar and through the electronic calendar on the General Court website. The notice of this meeting complies with the House rules and RSA 91A. Anyone who has a problem accessing the meeting should call 271-3600 or email hcs@leg.state.nh.us. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. I want to introduce the staff that are on the meeting assisting us. Jennifer Floor, the committee researcher. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call of attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Representative Bernstein, would you take the attendance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to you and good morning, everyone. It's March 11th, 2021, 9:05 a.m. We'll begin roll call with Representative Patrick Abrami.
Here, Mahoma Stratum. My wife is in the house.
Filling in for Mary Griffin today is Representative Troy Murray. Representative Murner, just tell us you're here and say good morning.
You have to unmute.
Yes, I was muted. Sorry. Yeah, I'm present and alone.
Thank you. Representative O'Leary.
Present in the house in Hudson, and my wife is wandering around.
Also from Hudson, Representative Russ Ober.
Present in Hudson at home with the 6 cats.
Representative Doucette.
Morning, from my home office in Salem alone.
Good morning. Your clerk is Alan Burstein, and I'm here in Nottingham, New Hampshire, in my home office by myself. Representative Robert Elliott.
Here, and my wife is in the living room.
Good morning. Representative John Janigian.
I'm here in Salem, and my wife is somewhere in the house.
Did I get Janigian right?
It's actually a hard G, Janigian.
All right. Next time I will get it. Apologies.
No problem.
Spend some time together, John, because I have a hard time.
No problem.
Representative Nunes.
Good morning, Mr. Clerk. Good morning, colleagues. I'm home alone in Pelham.
Good morning. Representative Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'm home alone.
Representative Spilsbury.
Good morning. Home alone in Charlestown.
Good morning. From Northwood, Representative Paul Tudor.
Morning. I'm here in the cellar by myself. My wife's upstairs.
Representative Susan Almy.
Home alone in Lebanon.
Representative Richard Ames.
I'm here in Jaffrey, home alone.
From the wonderful city of Dover, Representative Thomas Southworth.
Home alone in Dover.
Representative Malloy. Dennis Malloy. Representative Schamberg.
Schamberg is in New London in his truck headed to Wilmot alone.
Representative Edith Tucker. Representative Tucker. Representative Gomarlo.
Here in Swansea alone.
Representative Thomas Laufman. Representative Laufman. Representative Amanda Gorg.
Good morning. I am present and alone.
Good morning. Representative Mary Hacken Phillips.
Morning. I come to you from my office in Concord alone.
Representative James Murphy.
Good morning. I'm alone in my home office in Hanover.
And our chair, Representative Norman Major.
Good morning. I'm in my office, my home in Plasto. My wife is in the house.
Good morning. Mr. Chair, there are 21 members present, 3 are not.
Thank you, Representative Bernstein. I've got a couple of announcements. Yesterday, we had the hearing with Representative Michael Voss on House Bill 614. Now, he sent me an email last night, also sent it to the clerk. I feel I need to go over this with the committee. So it says, Mr. Clerk, during my testimony yesterday before the Ways and Means, I discovered that the amendment to the Science and Technology and Energy adopted for House Bill 614, which the House passed, was the wrong amendment. We adopted Amendment 2021-156H, but meant to adopt 2021-022H. I haven't had time to look at the recorded executive session to see how this error occurred. The question now, what do? Is it appropriate or possible to ask Ways and Means to adopt an amendment to fix this error? What other options do we have to save this bill? Thank you. That's from Representative Voss to the clerk with a copy to me. And this morning, I got an email from the clerk, Paul Smith, with a copy to Michael Voss. Good morning. Technically, Ways and Means isn't meant to deal with policy portions of the bill, but rather the tax implications. If the amendment would have implications on that, I'd suggest that you discuss it with the committee as soon as possible so they know what to work with. I also think in order to make the necessary change, you'll likely want to file a floor amendment to the bill when we have the next in session and address it there. That's Paul. So I just want you to be aware that when you read the bill as amended, that amendment wasn't the right amendment. So, all right. The other thing I want to make you aware is that next week I've scheduled public hearings on Tuesday the 16th. As we now have 6 Senate bills that have come to us. Senate Bill 22, relative to the sale of Lucky 7 tickets. And get this, also Senate Bill 25, titled relative to, Senate Bill 27, relative to the sale of Lucky tickets. I haven't read them yet, but they're the same relative to, so I'm scheduling them both at the same time. Then Senate Bill 23, changing the requirements that a member of the sponsoring charitable organization be present during certain games of chance. Senate Bill 25, relative to charity gaming licenses. Senate Bill 48, relative to the formula used to determine current use tax rates. And Senate Bill 103, relative to nexus provisions for certain disaster-related or emergency-related work performed in the state. So those are the bills that we'll have a public hearing on next Tuesday. So if you can download those and get familiar with those before that. And then the following 2 days, the 17th and 18th, we'll be updating revenue estimates. Finance is really in a pickle. They want our revenue estimates updated ASAP. And we will do them ASAP in a logical manner. And we're starting today looking at all the things associated with House Bill 2 And also associated with House Bill 2 is the single sales factor, House Bill 281, which they want to fold into House Bill 2. And so that's what we'll be concentrating on later today. Also today, we would like to be able to agree on House Bill 15 and get that exec out. And that's our last remaining first session bill. Then we have the 6 bills that we had a public hearing on. I'll wait and we'll exec those at a later time. So that's what our schedule is. So what I want you to do is that everybody received, I believe it was yesterday, from the DRA, their updated revenue estimates. Go over those, and then that'll be a basis of where we start when we do revenue estimates next Wednesday and Thursday. All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
do you know if those of us that have property on current use will be able to participate in the Senate bill debate on current use, or is that a conflict?
What you do is you make sure that that's so noted. I also have property in current use too, so I think when it comes to, I'm going to have to check with Paul on that. I would
Norm,
also this.
Jordan,
Yes, Jordan.
I think all you need to do is declare that you have a conflict of interest, and then you get to choose whether you feel comfortable acting on it individually. If it affects you no more or less than any other person in a similar circumstance, once you declare that there's a conflict, you should be able to participate in discussion of the bill and even voting on it.
Yeah, I believe you're right, but I'm just going to verify that with the clerk and the speaker.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, long ago they told us that at a time when about 25% of the people smoked, that smokers could vote on the smoking bills because on 25% is a lot of the population. And I think that there are quite a few people with current use. I don't have it, but.
Well, I'll find out. And I think what Jordan said is correct. But any other questions before we proceed?
Yeah, it's Pat. So what's the plan for the 6 bills that we heard yesterday in terms of work session? Would it be the following week?
It would be the following week. But we really need to get these revenues out.
Yeah.
With Ken, and they would like to have them now.
Right. Oh, I know.
and they have to work with our revenue estimates.
Right. My only concern is the some of the bills we heard yesterday are going to need some work. I mean, I guess we can retain them too, but anyway, we'll leave it at that.
Anything else? Okay. Then what I'd like to do is open the work session on House Bill 15. And if we can feel that the exec session, then we'll do that right after that. So on House Bill 15, we'll open the work session on that. And I just have to get my House Bill 15. House Bill 15, an act relative to including under the Meals and Rooms tax facilitators of internet transactions of motor vehicle rentals and facilitators of internet transactions of room occupancy. And we're dealing with Amendment 2021-0599H, sponsored by Representative Baxter, and we had a discussion with that yesterday. Do we have any further questions? And if we don't, does everybody feel we can go into an executive session?
Yes.
All right, then we will go into executive session on House Bill 15. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, Representative Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to pass my amendment, HB 0599.
Can we back up? We have to make a motion on the bill first and then make a motion on the amendment immediately after that.
Understood.
Your motion, Representative Baxter?
Then, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to pass HB 15.
Representative Baxter makes OTP on House Bill 15. Second.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair. Representative Nunes.
Representative Baxter, do you have another motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to make a motion to pass my amendment, HB 2021-0599.
I'll also second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, just let me finish my writing. Okay, the motion on amendment 0599H is up to pass. Moved by Representative Baxter, second by Representative Nunes. Any discussion? Representative Baxter?
Mr. Chair, would you like me to speak to the motion?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I talked about with the committee yesterday, the purpose of the amendment is to clarify any lingering doubt that remained about travel service agents being taxed, which was not the intent of the bill. So I know we have a large support among the committee members for the bill, and this amendment, which was written by DRA, alleviates that last lingering concern among some of the committee members, including myself, as well as other stakeholders and interest groups. So I'm hoping that we can get support for the amendment today, and I'm happy to answer any questions if any committee members have a question about the amendment still.
Any further questions or comments on the amendment? Any further questions or comments on the amendment? I see none. Whoops.
Dick Ames, Representative Ames has his hand up.
Representative Ames.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to, I'm speaking in opposition to the amendment. And first, there was reference made by Representative Baxter to DRA having drafted the amendment. I think it should be clear that DRA is not offering the amendment as a proposal. They did this for the representative and expressed their views on the amendment, which included the concern that it would create confusion, but they thought they could probably address that through rulemaking. That's what they said. I hope I'm characterizing it correctly. And for me, I think the confusion generated by this amendment is totally unnecessary, that the bill as drafted is the original bill as drafted is just right. And what is being created by this amendment is the significant potential for an interplay between the occupant and the room facilitator. I think that's right. Between the operator and the travel agent, excuse me, sorry. What is taxable is the full retail price charged for occupancy, which is what an operator will be paying. But what is not taxable is the travel agent's commission or compensation. And if you move some of the money into the travel agent category, it is no longer taxable, and there will be an incentive to do that. It's unnecessary. The original bill, the text of the original bill makes clear that the full retail price charged for occupancy is what's taxable. Let's leave it at that and not confuse the issue, but by trying to put in something that addresses essentially a non-issue as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ames. Representative Malloy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I concur with Representative Ames' assessment of this. I think it just adds a layer of confusion. This bill in its various forms has been in this committee now for a couple of years. A lot of people have worked on this very hard. Several of the people that sponsored this bill are in this committee right now, and Speaker Packard is the prime sponsor, and the bill that we presented, I think, is clean. It answers all the questions, and to Representative Ames' point is that I think we're adding a level of confusion. And I also concur that, that even though DRA helped work on this, I don't know that that is meaning that that's a, they don't endorse anything, but I don't know that that's relevant to this conversation, because the bill itself is a good bill. And I will not be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Representative Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to thank Representatives Malloy and Ames for their comments. I do just want to speak to what they said. It wasn't just worked on, it was 100% written by DRA. So it is, even though I'm putting forth the amendment, it was written by DRA. And I do want to speak to what Representative Ames said about it was DRA's belief that it creates confusion. That's not 100% accurate to my understanding. Carolyn, who wrote the amendment, said it has the possibility to create confusion. I think that'd be a better way to paraphrase what she said, because she said any amendment could theoretically, the new language, lead to something. But she is comfortable, and that's her own word, she's comfortable with the amendment as written, which isn't surprising because she wrote the amendment. So while she may not feel it's necessary because she believes the current bill is okay, she also is comfortable with the amendment. And while everyone on the committee might not share the concern that there's the issue with travel service agents being taxed without that original intent, there are committee members and stakeholders that feel that way. So this amendment is a way to prevent and address that concern while doing it in a responsible way. And that's why we've done multiple drafts, and I worked with the DRA so we could have an amendment that they are comfortable with. So I'm not quite sure what the harm is. And that's hopefully that addresses what the representatives have brought up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Almy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We could have handled this the way it should have been handled, which is just by putting something into the blurb, which is a legal signal to both the jail car and any court case about the travel agents. This does put in a measure that would be able to be played with, whether they win in court or not, on various businesses. And I want the bill to pass, but I hope that it can be clean. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions on the amendment? Any further questions or comments on the amendment? Seeing none, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the vote on the amendment. If you're in favor of the ought to pass on the amendment, respond by yes. If not, respond by no.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The amendment is 2021-0599H. We'll begin the roll call vote for this amendment to HB 15 with Representative Patrick Abrami.
Yes.
Representative Troy Murner.
Yes.
Jordan Olery, Representative Olery.
Find the microphone. Yes.
Representative Ober.
Yes.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Doucette.
Yes.
Representative Elliott.
Yes.
Representative Janigian.
Yes.
Representative Nunes.
Yes.
Representative Baxter.
Yes.
Representative Spilsbury.
No.
Representative Tudor.
Yes.
Representative Almy.
No.
Representative Ames.
No.
Representative Malloy.
No.
I'm out of order there. I apologize. Representative Southworth.
No.
Representative Schamberg.
No.
Representative Tucker. Not voting. Representative Gomarlo.
No.
Representative Loftman.
No.
Representative Gord.
No.
Representative Hacken Phillips.
No.
Representative Murphy.
No.
Chairman Major.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the final vote is 12 voting yes, 11 voting no. One member did not vote. The motion carries.
Was the member present that did not vote?
It's Representative Tucker, so no, she is not present.
Okay, fine.
Mr. Chairman, I can't find her.
Okay. The vote being 12 to 11, the amendment 0599 passes. So what we're now discussing, House Bill 15 with Amendment 0599H. Any questions or comments? Representative Southwood. Schamberg, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, since I'm in opposition to this motion, will I get a chance to speak against the motion?
I've just recognized you.
Thank you, sir. Representative Schamberg is presenting a minority position in opposition to this bill. I believe on February 10th, I opposed this bill because I believe it creates new taxes and new regulations. And today I find that I still must contend that House Bill 15 is creating a new tax with more government regulations. With the amending of the definitions under meals and rooms, RSA 78-A:3, Roman numerals 6, 13, and 18, I strongly believe House Bill 15 initiates a new tax when placed on goods and services when included in a bundled package for rental of a room. If I reserve a room for one night at the Inn on Pleasant Lake in New London for $249, my rooms and meals tax would be $22.41. But if the inn says, instead of you making a call to Ragged Mountain or Mount Centipede for skiing arrangements, the inn says, we have an arrangement with the mountains to offer you a winter sports package for another $180 so that you will be guaranteed lift tickets, skis, helmet, and a reserved spot for skiing. Guess what happens under House Bill 15? This bundled package approach is now considered to be part of the rooms and meals tax because it comes with the room and thus increases the amount of the meals and rooms tax to be charged with this new definition. A tax increase? I say yes. If you don't ski, say you want to take advantage of a flower arrangement package for the room, for your special someone, and a spa treatment, just like the sports package for skiing, this will fall under the new rooms and meals tax definition because it comes with the room and an increase in the amount of the meals and room tax to be charged under the amended definitions. If these items were to be purchased separately in the hotel lobby or call the ski mountains on your own, there would be no rooms and meals tax that is connected to the room. So if House Bill 15 is implemented with the amended definitions, what presently doesn't have a sales tax on it now will be included as part of the meals and rooms tax because it is part of the bundled package included with the room. And since this bill, Mr. Chairman, is also dealing with car sharing platforms, I feel that once again, House Bill 15 is changing the regulations to tax this peer-to-peer approach. Being peer-to-peer is not about tourism and is not like a car rental company. We are talking about individual car owners trying to cover expenses by using a public bulletin board. This peer-to-peer public platform does not own or operate any fleet of vehicles. They do not take possession or control of a customer's car. They are public bulletin boards for connections. If House Bill 15 is implemented, it seems that this bill would require me, the car owner, the host, to register with the DRA and post a business license. What happened to promoting the entrepreneurial spirit? Are we going to tax citizens who simply want to share their personal property with another person potentially within their community? Mr. Chair, I present a rhetorical question. What is the difference between taxing peer-to-peer car sharing under the rooms and meals tax and me individually speaking with my neighbor to borrow a pickup truck to do yard work and filling their truck up with gas when I am done? That is consideration paid for the use of a vehicle. Is this a transaction subject to taxation if it isn't done over the internet? Can a transaction be taxed because it is done over the internet here in New Hampshire, yet other similar transactions won't be subject to taxation? I find that House Bill 15 as applied to peer-to-peer sharing over the public platform seems to be, as I said before on February 10th, anti-entrepreneurial. I would now include that House Bill 15 seems to be anti-innovation and even anti-green. I feel that if this committee chooses to amend the law to tax online platforms, the meals and rooms tax with this House Bill 15, I believe, is a new tax with a new regulations. Mr. Chairman, I stand in opposition to House Bill 15. Thank you.
Testimony, Representative Schamberg. Representative Alamy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Schamberg has brought together a number of new accusations. I do not know if we have the capability of suspending while we listen to the DRA respond to them. One of them is that packages would be taxed because of this bill. Packages have never been taxed of skis or flowers or whatever under the rooms and meals tax. I do not believe that it is possible that they would be taxed with this bill in place, but the DRA is in the audience. The other one is relative to innovation. When you innovate in a way that you are still providing the service, but you are evading the tax that has been in place for a long time on that kind of service, our law has to be altered to include equivalent services that have changed due to innovation. If we don't do that, we are creating a situation where people who are providing the service in a more traditional way have a double on competition against them. And that is what you are advocating for, as far as I can tell. I would like to ask if there is some way that we can ask the DRA to respond. Thank you.
I'm going to honor that. Let me just check the attendees. Carolyn,
Carolyn and Melissa and Devin.
yeah, Carolyn, Devin, and Melissa.
Mr. Chair, is the proper procedure to ask for, because the motion has been made, hasn't it? I think we may have to have the motion withdrawn, O2P as amended.
To be safe, you're right.
And we can go back into executive session after we hear from the DRA.
Would the motion about to pass with the amendment, Representative Baxter and Representative Nunes, would you want to withdraw your motion?
No.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, the reason I say that is because we've been working on this for numerous sessions now. So I feel like we've got a pretty good understanding of what this bill does.
Mr. Chair, I actually agree with Representative Almy that I think the DRA can address all the points that Representative Schomburg brought up and help your cause, actually, Representative Baxter. But that's all we're trying to do. You're going to be allowed to make your motion again. It's just a proper procedure.
I was hoping that they could withdraw the motion so we could have this. Representative Spilsbury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And perhaps it's helpful if I read from my own written notes of the testimony that Carolyn Lear provided at our hearing on January 28th.
Thank you.
That is, she specifically stated vacation packages, including ski passes and add-ons, only the room charges are taxed under the maintenance, under the meals and rooms tax.
So that
I don't think that's an open issue.
Fine. So that puts that question to bed. Especially if it's separately stated, it's not taxable. Representative Almy. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. I noticed that Representative Spilsbury had his hand up. But you just talked. Sorry. I just, one thing that I forgot to address was Turo, when they came in last year, we established that they're providing the insurance. They're providing, I believe, cleaning if necessary, if there's been damage done to the car by the person that is loaning it. There are a number of other things that I cannot remember at this point that they do provide. They are not just a bulletin board. They are making it possible for a person that will let their car go to a stranger feel comfortable letting the car go to a stranger.
Any further comments or questions? Representative Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to thank Representative Almy, Representative Abrami, and you, Mr. Chair, for your hard work on this bill. And I already have a motion that I made that was seconded by Representative Nunes. So I would just like to request that we vote on my motion of ought to pass HB 15. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion on the motion about to pass with amendment? Representative Yurley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Whoever writes the blurb should probably incorporate the statement I think Representative Spilsbury just said, so that the people on the floor have a good idea as to what this bill does and doesn't do. May I make that suggestion, sir?
That's a good suggestion. Representative Ames.
Thank you. So I believe where we're at, just double checking actually, because we've had a lot of intervening things. We're now on the motion ought to pass as amended. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I'm going to vote for this ought to pass as amended. I do so with reluctance because I think the bill has been diminished, made vulnerable to being sidetracked by litigation, and I regret that, but I think it's a very good bill. It levels the playing field in a way that's been needed for several years. That became evident through litigation brought several years ago by one of the, I think, room facilitator groups that said that DRA was overreaching. So this is a good bill. It's a good bill with the amendment. It could be much better if we hadn't added this language to the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Representative Ames. Any further comments, Representative Bromley?
I will be voting for the bill, obviously, but, you know, I got a call from the lobby, one of the lobby firms, the firm that Sean Thomas went to from the DRA, who actually wrote the language last year. And Sean doesn't know why this amendment is needed either. But I tried to explain, and, you know, I just wanted to pass that along, that Sean Thomas, who basically wrote the language in the subcommittee with us that worked on this. But we'll vote for it as is with the amendment, and let's move this forward.
Any further comments? Once more, any further comments on House Bill 15 as amended? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a roll call vote on HB 15 FN. The motion is ought to pass with amendment. We'll begin the roll call vote with Representative Abrami.
Yes.
Representative Troy Martin.
Yes.
Representative Ullery.
Yes.
Representative Ober.
No.
The clerk votes yes. Representative Doucette. Representative Doucette.
Good now, Fred, you're good.
Yes.
Thank you. Representative Elliott. You're muted, Representative.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Representative Janigian.
Yes.
Representative Nunes.
Yes.
Representative Baxter.
Yes.
Representative Spilsbury.
Yes.
Representative Tudor.
Yes.
Representative Almy.
Yes.
Representative Ames.
Yes.
Representative Southworth.
Yes.
Representative Malloy.
Yes.
Representative Schamberg.
No.
Representative Tucker.
Yes.
Representative Gomarlo.
Yes.
Representative Loftman.
Yes.
Representative Gorg.
Yes.
Thank you. Representative Hacken Phillips.
Yes.
Representative Murphy.
Yes.
Chairman Major.
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Chair, the vote is 22 in the affirmative, 2 voted against. The motion and the amendment carries.
The vote being 22 in favor and 2 against, the motion of ought to pass with amendment 05998 passes. We'll go on the regular calendar, and
Mr. Chair, Representative Schamberg here.
you'll be providing a minority report. Right?
Yes, I will provide the minority report. Am I to send an attachment to you or to the clerk or whatever?
You send the minority report to me, and the majority report also comes to me.
And I'm sorry, what was that?
The majority and minority report.
Oh, okay.
Comes.
Thank you, sir. And when do you want that?
Today is Thursday, Monday.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. That closes our business on the executive session. All right, now we will change and just go into a discussion of the parts of House Bill 2 that affects the revenues. All given a document that Jennifer put together for us, where she went through the entire House Bill 2 and pulled out those sections which she felt had some relation with revenues that were in House Bill 2. And the first part, the first item is number 4, establishing the graphic service fund in the Department of Administrative Services. Section 4, page 2, appears to establish a new dedicated fund, though is not labeled as such. Have you had a chance to look at that? And I'm going to pull up House Bill 2 separately on another computer, because I don't have a copy of it. They mailed me a copy, but I haven't received it yet. Any, Representative Almy?
Mr. Chairman, I found, I think it's about 10 other cases in which they'd set up dedicated funds that are not treated as dedicated funds.
Okay.
It may not be that many. I've got to go back and count, but there are a fair number of them. And this one, I believe, a number of these only need a 612. That's on in 612, all the dedicated funds, RSA 612, all the dedicated funds are supposed to be established, and the only difference is in some cases within dedicated funds, they use accounting units only, rather than listing things which could include this, I guess, arguably as on an accounting unit, but not as a dedicated sub-fund within DAS. But I don't believe DAS has a dedicated fund that it would be a sub-fund of. It's a revolving account and separated off so that monies that come in for graphic services get separated off from everything else in DAS and can't get transferred to them easily.
And I don't see anything associated with these graphic services dedicated funds that would impact the revenues that we need to get involved with this specific issue.
So we're not going to deal at all with the dedicated funds issues, because when they put on, that is one of our charges as the Ways and Means Committee, and they put when they put something in without that, we have to go back and mop it up the next year.
So we will discuss this when we go into dedicated funds. I don't see anything here that's going to.
There's nothing about revenues.
The next,
except sequestering.
The next item is number 24, suspend revenue sharing.
Norm, Chris Shea has his hand up. He may be able to shed some light.
Okay, Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Representative Major. So just to give the committee a little background on the graphic services, in the budget that's treated as a restricted fund. So the revenue they collect goes directly to graphic services. And at the end of the fiscal year, if there's any money left, it transfers to the general fund. If there's a negative, the general fund helps pay for any shortfall. So typically, surpluses have ranged anywhere from $13,000 to $60,000. In fiscal year 20, there was a $140,000 shortfall in revenue due to the pandemic. So the department is requesting to set up a dedicated fund that clearly defines, that this graphic services can keep the money in the fund. So when they do have a year where there's short revenue, they can go into the fund and bring the money forward. There's also some concerns about some long-term employees within that division or group that will be retiring. And they wanted to, in the next few years, and they were hoping to kind of build up a reserve to help with the payout that would be associated with a person leaving state service, instead of having to go to a salary and benefit adjustment account, which has been diminishing over the years based on the better budgeting that occurs with positions. So I just wanted to give the committee that, that is what's going on with graphic services. And it does establish a dedicated fund in Section 7 of House Bill 2 is introduced in 612, just to be clear there as well. Section 7.
Section 7. And
yeah, it creates the graphic services fund and it inserts it into 612 following subparagraph 364. And
so this section number that's associated with this, it should have been Section 7 rather than Section 12.
Well, that's where the fund's created. I think the sections you have earlier kind of describe what's going on with graphic services. That just to hopefully help clarify anything. Now,
are there a lot of 612s in Section 7? I didn't see them.
Section 7 is just graphic services.
Yes, it's specific to graphic services. I would need to look at some of the others, Representative Almy, to see why they didn't include the 612, why they didn't. There may be a reason.
Right. Section 7 is strictly graphic services fund. Yeah. All right.
None of us have a copy of HB2, I think.
I just pulled it up on my laptop. So the next section, number 24, suspend revenue sharing with cities and towns for the biennium.
Norm, there's more questions.
Representative Ober.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've only been in the House for 20 years, but I'm a little lost here. What is the objective? What are we doing here talking about House Bill 2, which is a finance bill? I understand the requirements we have, but what are we supposed to get out of this discussion today?
Finance has asked us to look at House Bill 2 and pick out all those things associated with revenue and give their estimate, give an estimate to them, whether it's going to be positive or negative to their revenues. So we've been asked by finance to do this. They gave us about a half a dozen places to look at. I asked Jennifer to go through the whole House Bill 2 and see if there are other issues that could possibly affect revenues. And that's what we're doing today.
Understand, thank you.
Okay. Representative Bromley.
Yeah, then, so as far as this one is concerned, it creates a new fund, but it doesn't create revenue or destroy revenue. It just moves revenue around to a different fund. Is that correct? Maybe Chris Shea could respond to that. Right? It doesn't create revenue. And is it that different departments pay in for use of this graphic service bureau?
Exactly.
The internal movement of monies.
So all the a lot of materials that you get if you're on a fiscal committee right now are coming from graphic services. We're using them to do mass production, and we pay them for that service, as do other agencies that use graphic services.
It comes out of your budget.
The impact on your general fund could be anywhere from $10,000 to $60,000 a year, because you would now have that restricted. De minimis in the amount. I mean, it would be in the other fund category to begin with. You wouldn't see it, you wouldn't know it. And the reason for, again, establishing the dedicated account or fund was to build up a little bit of a reserve in the fund so that they could address some anticipated retirements coming up, but as well as when there's times when agencies, as we are experiencing with the pandemic, aren't using graphic services as much because people aren't producing paper the same way they might have in the past because of everything being sent electronically. Graphic services doesn't have enough revenue to, at least in 2020, didn't have enough revenue to cover its expenditures. So the general fund has had to cover that for them. So again, I think this was just an effort on their part to put some money in a dedicated fund and use it for graphic services over the long period, not the short term.
Okay, Representative Yurley, followed by Representative Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just concerned about setting up yet another dedicated fund that we're going to have to monitor. While the idea of setting money aside in a fund seems to make sense, and it seems to me fiscally sound, is this going to wind up with one of those other funds that you and Representative Almy are going to have to look at to see whether or not it's being used, or is going to wind up, someplace in the garbage heap where no one does anything with it because the money for once being done is now just languishing in an account somewhere?
Let me clear something up here. Our purpose right now is to identify those parts of House Bill 2 that will affect revenues that will go to the general fund or the highway fund or fish and game fund. We came upon this. This is the first item, has to do with a dedicated fund being set up. We looked at it, and it doesn't seem like it's going to affect the revenues going to the general fund. So we will save any further discussion on that with the dedicated fund committee. So then we can move on to section 42, which is the next one that's been identified by Jennifer and the finance committee.
Representative Elliott had his hand up.
Cities and towns for the biennium.
No, Representative Elliott had his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Representative Elliott. Thanks, Pat, for keeping me honest here. Representative Elliott, you're muted.
Yes, I spent a lot of time yesterday trying to get a copy of House Bill 2. And when my computer was done, I realized that I got the wrong year in there. I had 2019, and that was 160 pages long. So then I tried 2021, and I was told that there is no report yet. So I'm assuming that I should have used the year 2020 Is that correct?
No, I'm looking at the House Bill 2 that just came out on the site.
When you say it just came out, you talking about today or yesterday?
It's been out a few days. Is there a date on it? I see. I don't see a date. It's the 2021 session. And they have,
21. Well, maybe there's something wrong with my computer because it says, yesterday it said that it hasn't been written yet. So I'll try again with 2021, getting a copy, which I assume will be another 160 pages long.
I gotta get back to the section.
Representative Obama was shaking his head no. Do you mind if I ask him why? Well,
Yeah, because Jennifer Four summarized for us the sections of House Bill 2 that were relevant, and that's what I'm working off of here.
I just resent it to Representative Elliott because I had it up. And so
She sent you a summary.
well, thank you.
We're not touching all of House Bill 2, just some sections. That was
and I
sent
sent
to us.
your legislative email. Is that okay? Is that correct?
No, don't send it send it to 334 North Broadway, Salem, New Hampshire.
I emailed it.
Oh,
Email.
okay.
It's only about 7 or 8 pages long.
Oh, okay. That's a blessing.
About 160 pages.
Okay.
Thank you, Jenny.
Okay. On to the second piece of the many pieces. Has to do with suspending revenue sharing with cities and towns for the biennium. That's strictly up to the Finance Committee to make that. All we can do is come up, and we will be, is what is the total amount of revenue the rooms and meals tax is going to be raising in FY 22 and 23 and 21. And there's a certain percentage by law that should go back to the towns as long as the legislature doesn't suspend it, in which they've been doing it, and just sending a portion of it back each year.
Just to add to that, this provision is exactly the same as the provision 2 years ago in the previous budget.
Yeah,
exactly.
And this one here, the Finance Committee is going to have to make up the decision what they want to do. Once we finalize what the revenues are going to be in the Ways and Means, we gave them our estimates. When we work on it next week, we may change that depending upon what we find out. The next one is enabling the Liquor Commission to process merchant cards, and that's section 43.
Can we have Chris Shea explain that, Norm? His hand's up.
Okay, Representative Al, yeah. Sue, I'm sorry, we'll hear from Chris first.
Thank you, Representative Major. So section 43, the Liquor Commission processing of merchant cards, that's been in House Bill 2 for at least 3 times now. And what that language does, it allows the Liquor Commission not to have to go through DOIT when they have an issue with their computer system that's attached to their point of service or point of sales. And so they've asked for that each year, each of the budget years, I think for the last 3 cycles, because there was some concerns that DOIT couldn't be as responsive as they might need if their systems went down, say on the weekend. I think they have a contractor on retainer is not the right word, but they have somebody that are working with to make sure that they can keep their credit card system up and running. And if there's any issues, they can be nimble and quick to respond. And so in terms of a revenue impact, there's no direct revenue impact related to that.
So we can move on.
You can.
The next item is section 77. Transfer of funds from the Revenue Stabilization Reserve account to the general fund surplus. And that's strictly a decision of the Finance Committee. And so we should be able to move on. The next is section 78, reduce the tax rate of and in 2027, eliminate the interest and dividend tax. Now, the way it's written in the budget, it's going to affect FY23. And FY23 is, what is the estimate from the DRA? Has it changed? And what did they provide?
Yes.
As an estimate, has it changed?
Yeah, they did. They said the impacts in fiscal 23, 6.3 million reduction.
Okay, and was it
And that came
updated
from the DRA, as it turns out.
patients to us this past week?
Is the DRAs on the line? Can we just ask them if they still stand behind the 6.3 million?
Yes. Let me see who's here.
I just promoted Carolyn.
Okay, good. Carolyn? Carolyn Lear?
Hi, Mr. Chair. Carolyn Lear, Assistant Commissioner at the New Hampshire Department of Revenue. I can confirm that the 6.3 million figure is still good for fiscal year 2023. But if you have any in-depth questions about that analysis, I would ask that you unmute Melissa Rollins, who actually did that analysis.
Anybody want to ask Melissa Rollins on the analysis she did to get the 6.3? Representative Almy?
Thank you. Is that just the estimate payments for March, April, and June of 23?
Why don't we bring Melissa in?
I gave her permission to speak.
Melissa, did you hear that question?
I did. For the record, Melissa Rollins, Senior Financial Analyst at the Department of Revenue. Thank you, Representative Almy, for your question. You're spot on. That is just for those estimate payments in April and June. It's about 20, it's just a small percentage that will be applicable. About 27% will be applicable for fiscal year 23. So just a partial impact because of estimate payments.
Okay.
And if I could, then after, in the following budget years, we will lose 20% of the revenue sequentially every year until it's gone.
Thank you for the question. It's a little bit more each year. So when you get to fiscal year 24, you're now having the remaining estimates in returns plus the next year's estimates. So when you get to fiscal year 24, the impact goes to 22.2 million and then hovers around the 20 million mark until you get to the full phase out, which will be felt in fiscal year 2029.
Did we get, I don't think we got a sheet that shows the extension out to FY29.
Can we get that information when we meet with you before we meet with you next Wednesday?
Yeah, I think that would be, I think it will be in HB2 once that's fully submitted and posted. Chris can confirm that for us as well.
Well, we need your estimate, whether it's in H. As we need to confirm that's what the revenues are going to be in those years.
Representative, this is Carolyn Lear again. I think what Melissa was trying to say is that will be in the fiscal note for HB2, and that we have not given that to Chris. It probably will be given to him today. So
Okay.
as long as the fiscal note is to you by Wednesday, you should have it. But I don't know that we know how long it will take them to turn that around.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I have a follow-up on this? Well, this is based on, I believe, on what we got in FY 24-19. And of course, we won't know what the future is going to bring that could provide for this tax. But I just want to say that we have never before, a few terms ago, tried to put multi-year taxes that are only affecting future budgets, not the budget we're in, into the budget bill, which cannot be properly vetted and argued because it's part of the budget. And I believe that this is fiscally irresponsible, that we are committing the state to losing a very large amount of money at some point in the future. We have no idea what the state is going to need at that point. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Representative Ames.
I want to first second what Representative Almy just said, but I want to emphasize sort of a piece of that that this conversation points towards. We're talking about revenue losses in the years after this 2-year budget, and I think we need to, when we have a proposed piece of legislation like this that reaches beyond the budget period. And that's good that we're doing that. But I think as a general principle, we need to, it's one of our responsibilities to document what those impacts are in the years after the, in this case, fiscal year 23. And so here in the case of this tax, it's very clear there are significant impacts. I'd like to see those clearly laid out. I believe that's what DRA is going to be doing for us. We're going to be looking at other sections of HB2 that also have similar, that relate forward and have impact. And we need to put it all together and show to what extent we're diminishing, or maybe in some cases increasing the flow of revenue into the general fund and education trust fund.
I completely agree with both yours and Representative Almy's comments, but we have to live with what we have right now. To me, that's not the right way to do it, but we need to address it. Further comment on section 78, which has to do with a reduction in the interest and dividend tax. And we'll move on to
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I could, I also think that this particular way of doing it, reducing by percentage, puts the advantage to the richest people up front. The way that it was being done in the bill that was put in, it increased the deductions each year, which took away part of the tax each year. It took away less of it in the beginning, but it also helped enormously the people who have the most trouble paying it from the beginning. And this one does not. Thank you.
What would your recommendation be?
Well, to eliminate it altogether, but faulting that to use the deduction method, which at least helps the people who have the most trouble paying.
And would you say
Right.
use a reduction method that generates the same amount of reduction?
I believe that it would not generate as much reduction from the beginning because the people that would be, I'm not sure. We need the DRA to take a look at it.
Why don't we do that and see what that looks like? Okay. Representative Nunes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In this discussion, are we talking about the bill that came through that raised the exemption? Is that what we're saying? That we would like to be more familiar with that bill instead of what's going on here?
Yes, we retain that bill to do that. But
thank you. And just some of the language that was on there, we were saying deduction, and I just wanted to clarify that we were talking about the bill with the exemptions, with the raised exemption.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. It's just clarification. Thank you.
Anything else on the interest and dividend tax?
Norm?
Yeah, Representative Bromley.
Yeah, I mean, there's the two bills. The one was Lang's bill, and he also had the tax credit reversal. But that was the minimal bill. The other bill was the big bill that actually got rid of it in 5 years. Got rid of this tax in 5 years. I think that's the bill that also, but they also increased the exemptions as it went along.
HB 528.
Yeah. So look, I think for now we're trying to estimate what the impact of the governor's position is for finance of the next 2 years, which we're doing. But if as a committee we think that another approach, we can insert what one of the other bills and try to convince finance to insert it into HB2 instead. But that's the only option, really. Other than that, or just vote against the budget.
So put your thinking cap on, review those two bills, and relative to what the governor's proposing, and see if you can come up with what you think it might be a better way.
With the understanding that there's many members that don't want this reduction at all, even some Republicans, by the way. So not to this extent, but that's another discussion.
It's not going to be easy. Right. Representative Elmy.
Yes, I think that we need the DRA's comparison of how much loss each time in order to discuss that.
Yes. This is our first blush, and put these questions out on the table. What do we need to do? All right. We go to the next section, which is section 90. Oh, hold on a second. Yeah. Section 92 through 94. Reduce the tax rate on the meals and rooms tax. And this is reducing it from 9% to 8.5%, the meals and rooms tax. And Chris, what does the governor have for reducing it 0.5%? Chris Shea, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still with you. Sorry. So it's $19 million in 22 and in 23.
And that came from the DRA, my understanding. We all have these numbers, by the way. This when we were doing the comparison of the governor's revenues. These are the adjustments made for his new tax reduction.
A comment on that? Chair Major?
Yes.
I don't have that sheet that Representative Abrami just spoke to right in front of me. It's somewhere in this mess here. But what I remember is that there was an increase in this revised document from the governor of the expected amount to be collected from rooms and meals tax total for this year. And but then that increase, it seemed to me, should have led to a greater loss in the next 2 years, because now we're working off of a higher amount. And with the drop in the percentage in the tax, it essentially means you lose more. It's only $2 or $3 or $4 million, but it's something. So maybe that's a question to DRA.
Chris, did you get that?
I think this really is a question to DRA, but
I heard what Representative Ames said, and I would defer to DRA, but I think part of the issue is that there's been no adjustments because the governor introduced a revenue as part of his budget proposal. Since then, he's come out with a letter where he's adjusted some of his assumptions related to the revenue, but we don't have any other adjustments at this point. But again, I would defer to DRA to see how they are handling that, if at all at this point.
In the governor's letter, a lot of that has to do with the results in February. The results in February total is close to, it's up about 18 or 19 dollars. But one of the things we want to remember is that $10 million of that is one-time money due to the lottery, the Powerball, and the other one coming in, which doesn't happen every year. So that's a one-time event. And the other one is the tax audit of extra $10 million in February that normally never comes in February. That's according to the DRA, that's an anomaly. So when you add those two together, $20 million. And so you subtract that from the February results, you're going to be under the plan rather than over the plan by 18 point something million. The governor in his letter indicates that because of February's results being so high compared to the plan, there's a lot of shifting going on. So we've got to look at that closely. So what we need from the DRA is the $19 million reduction in 22 and 23 with what we know now about maybe the reopening and the economy. These numbers change by March 17th or 18th. So anything more on the meals and rooms tax? The next is section 95 to 97.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Allen.
Thank you. The only result of this tax reduction would be that we're losing $19 million a year plus maybe something. Because people do not pay attention to the tax on their bills. And if they did, they would realize that they're going to get an extra 5 cents back on a $10, I think it's on a $10 purchase. And they just aren't going to react to that. It just seems like an unnecessary thing to do. It would be better to put that kind of money into something that's going to help the owners of the restaurants, which I think the Senate has been working on.
When you're putting a budget together and you need an extra $20 million, this is one way of getting it. There's many ways to skin a cat. Tucker.
My understanding is that that slight reduction is for large group sales or weddings or big conventions or things like that.
That's across the board, everything.
And, you know, I just wonder whether we shouldn't be asking someone in the restaurant lodging business, whether that is really where activity is apt to happen. This is a really significant amount of money. And I'm just bewildered as to whether that's really how that industry works. It'd be very hard to get it back in the future.
Representative Laughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I have to agree with Representative Almy about, you know, the impact this has on the consumer and whether or not it makes them choose our businesses versus an alternative simply because of this tax reduction. I'm highly skeptical that it makes any difference other than it will reduce our revenues. You know, and this is a high performing tax revenue source for the state. And every dollar we raise from out-of-state tourists with this tax revenue stream is a dollar that we don't have to raise through property taxes or some other means. And I just think that the net effect of reducing this tax rate is going to be reduction in state revenue, really no difference in the kind of consumer activity in this area, and perhaps a downshifting of costs because the state will be less able to assist municipalities because of the reduction in funds. I think this is, it sells well politically, saying we're going to reduce this rate. I think it's bad for the state. And I'm sorry to see it happening.
Representative Gramalo.
You, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add that the amount of work that both businesses and DRA have to do to change the rate 0.5% is not worth the effort. I mean, it's just just wanted to put that piece in there. You have to change your computer system to accommodate the change in the rate, and yeah, so.
Such a little change generates $20 million a year.
Yeah.
And that's, my feeling is that's the way they see it. It's, the money is whatever. Representative Almy, you have your hand up again.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to point out at this point, section 65 on page 26, the governor has suspended the funding of travel and tourism development for the biennium. Now, that was installed when we put the rooms and meals tax up to 9% during the Great Recession to help us get through the Great Recession. And it was a trade-off for the tourism and travel on lodging and restaurant association that they appreciated. What it does is it provides advertising, large-scale advertising to whatever markets they think are going to be most important for New Hampshire to provide the image of New Hampshire and provide the idea that you want to go to New Hampshire for your vacations. And ever since we put that in, with a little dip when they took it out for one term, we have had 5% per year growth in travel and tourism, in rooms and meals taxes, particularly in specific. And so it has more than paid for itself, and it has helped all of the smaller businesses. The big chains and the really big places like Mount Washington Hotel can do their own advertising. The rest of them can't. And this is what has been helping increase the tourism inside of New Hampshire. And it's being suspended for 2 years.
No matter if we like the policy that's in House Bill 2, our job today is to evaluate the changes that would affect revenues.
And this change does affect revenues. It's going to, we're coming back from the major recession and from people being stuck in their houses forever and wanting to travel. If New Hampshire is not in advertising in front of them, they're going to choose to go other places. And every other state knows that.
So section 55, you're talking about?
65.
65.
It's on page 26.
You know what? The latest issue of House Bill 2 on page 26 covers, let's get this thing. $55. 56, 57, 58. So you said it's section 65? Susan, you're muted. You're muted, Susan.
Sorry, I can't unmute while I'm trying to look it up. It's called suspension of the funding of travel and tourism development. I've got it down as 26, but I can't look at it at the same time that we're meeting.
Okay, so it's section 60 something, right?
65.
65, okay.
Or if you search for travel and tourism, I'm going to try and go back and look at that again.
My section 65 has to do with Office of Professional Licenses and Certification.
Good grief, how did that, whoops, oh dear.
Major, this is Chris. It's section 55 of House Bill. It's located on page 26.
Thank you.
That makes sense.
Yeah, if you're looking at a PDF, it's page 31 of the PDF, but it's listed as page 26 of HB2.
Correct. Thank you, Representative Burstein. I do that all the time.
Yeah, I'm on the PDF.
Yeah, here it is. I got the page right, but I managed to, I'm getting cataracts and it's getting harder to see. So it's just 3 lines on page 31 of the PDF and page 26 of the other one.
Okay.
But that costs considerably less than the 20 million, if I remember correctly. It's around 6 or 8 million that has been going into that advertising. And the idea that they're taking it out just at the time when people are going to be making decisions to go places is difficult.
So taking that out, how much is it going to affect the revenue? You will want to look at what the effect will be.
Yeah.
Maybe you can.
Plymouth State University keeps on doing studies that show it's $8 for every $1 we spend on, and of the $8 we get back.
So maybe you could continue looking at that?
Oh, yes. I'm going to have to go back and find the Plymouth State stuff. I think it was $8 in taxes that we were getting back for every $1 we spent on it.
All right. So you're gonna look at that section and
Yeah.
and bring the committee up to date when we meet on Wednesday next week.
Right. I will find the people that are doing that.
Okay, the next section has to do with section 95 to 97.
Before we move on then, Norm, can I ask a question?
Yes, Representative Yearly.
Chris, what is going to be the money effect on it? I mean, how much money is it that we're not going to be losing? I'd like to see that number. I know it's a static number and all that stuff, but
In
based
relation to what, Representative Ulrey, to what was just being discussed in the travel and tourism that
yes.
So just so the committee knows, the Finance Committee is working on this section right now. We're trying to figure out why it was suspended in House Bill 2. It may have been suspended because based on the calculation, maybe they would have gotten less money than they typically got in past years. But we're looking to find out how that was calculated and what the number would have been compared to what was put in the budget. We're having some challenges getting that information. But once I get something, I can share it back with you as to what the number would be, as well as what was put in the budget and maybe why they did this suspension. In prior budgets, they suspend it because the committee has made decisions that they want to just straight appropriation on the department related to travel and tourism and not abide by this. But I don't know if that's the case in this instance. So I'll have to get back to you, Representative Ulrey. Just a long way of saying that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Just because the argument or the discussion that Susan put forward is compelling.
It's been compelling for about over a decade now. Thank you.
Okay.
Representative Lockman seems to have his hand up.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was briefly disconnected, so I'm not sure if it was touched on, but I did hear before I lost my connection, wondering what the effect was. And I wonder if, our tourism leadership there could comment on the return on investment of money spent in advertising, because that would seem to illuminate how much return we're losing out on by investing nothing. If in past years when we do put money in, the expected return on that investment is X, then that increased tourism activity is what we're losing out on by investing nothing. So I don't know, maybe that's a number we could get.
Okay, Representative Alamy is going to be pursuing along with Chris.
Yeah, I think Chris will be pursuing with the department, and I can pursue the Plymouth State University studies. They've done them on every few years.
We should have more information when we meet next Wednesday. Okay, the next item is section 95 to 97 to increase the filing threshold for the business enterprise tax. And the last thing we received from the DRA was it would increase or have a decrease of 2.3 million in each year. That's still a good number.
But that number's changed now, Norm. And maybe, I think the DRA can explain their new numbers.
Chris?
But again, I think the DRA would be the more appropriate, but.
What I have is, it doesn't change for 22, but it goes from 2.3 to 3.1 for 2020.
Right. But on the original sheet that we worked on like a month ago, whatever it was 2.3 and 2.3. And DRA has now changed it to 0 and 3.1. 3.1 loss of revenue. So they may want to explain the reason why they changed from their original.
Or Carolyn?
Yes, Representative Major, this is Melissa Rollins again. So yes, happy to explain this. So I believe Representative Abrami, what you're speaking to is a proposal that was originally received by the governor's office from the DRA. This had a little bit different parameters than what came through in HB2, which is what changes the amount of the fiscal impact. So I think what you have in front of you was a proposal just based on changing the business, one of the business enterprise thresholds versus changing both of the thresholds. And in HB2, it changes the gross receipt threshold from 220,000 to 250,000, and then the enterprise value threshold from 111,000 to 250,000. So with the business enterprise tax, there are two thresholds, and HB2 changes both of those thresholds, which is what the increase is. So we have a fiscal impact of 3.1 million for fiscal year 23. And no impact in 22. And this is because there might be a slight impact in fiscal year 22 because of estimates, but it was a minor impact because the reduction is so low that we just put the full impact in fiscal year 23.
Okay. And that's not going to change.
Correct.
Okay, any further questions? I'll ask Melissa.
Yeah, I have a question.
Representative Ames.
Going forward after fiscal year 23, is the number any different?
It is not. That's the full impact.
Okay.
I have a question also. How many people, how many businesses will cease to file?
Sure. Great question, Representative Almy. So I'm going to give two data points here just because I think they're both, they both have some good information. So the amount of people that will, or taxpayers that will potentially not file, and there's a caveat to this, so I'll say that afterwards, is 34,780. That's based on tax year 18 return data, which is our last completed year. However, of those 34,780 taxpayers, only 5,027 of them had a liability. So a lot of taxpayers are filing zero returns and not paying because they potentially meet the threshold but don't have a tax liability. What I do want to say in my caveat is gross receipts is a little bit difficult to calculate on, only because not all taxpayers report their gross receipts. It's a line that is on the business enterprise tax return. However, it is not a line that calculates into a tax liability. So we do have a lot of taxpayers that put zero on there. So we just assume they wouldn't need to file. However, they may need to file. So that 34,780 no longer filing is a maximum filing amount. There may be, it may be a reduced number.
Melissa, what was that number? 5,000 and what?
5,027 are the taxpayers that will no longer be filing the business enterprise tax who currently had a liability in tax year 18.
Any further questions for Melissa? All right.
Mr. Chairman, just a follow. So it's only 5,000 out of how many approximately are filing, are paying now?
That's Representative Almy. Would you like the total number of BET filers as a whole?
Well, no, that pay. I'm thinking about the lawsuit we once had in which The business enterprise tax was created because the big businesses were saying they were paying the business tax and nobody else was. So I always want to make sure that we've got enough people paying the latter so that the former doesn't get attacked again.
Sure, if you give me 1 second. So there are, and I'm basing this on our triangles that are in our annual report. There are around 38,000 that are paying. So of the 38,000, 5,000 will no longer be required to file and pay based on the threshold increase.
But just intuitively, that sounds safe.
There'd be about 34,000 paying left. Any further questions for Melissa? All right, then we will move on. Section 98 to 99, reduce the rate of the tax for the business enterprise tax from 0.6 to 0.55. And then initially that showed that reduced the revenues FY22 $4.7 million, FY23 13.3. Are those numbers still good? Melissa?
Yes, Representative Major, those numbers are still accurate.
Norm, and then there's the offsetting BPT revenue increase that they also estimated. Melissa may want to explain that.
The offsetting BPT revenues for 22 would be an increase of 2.8 and 8.1. And Melissa, go ahead and explain that.
Sure. So I think most of you are pretty familiar with our rate reduction analysis, knowing that it's on a static analysis. This one is a little bit different because we're just reducing the bet rate. Typically, the rate reductions go hand in hand with bet and BPT together. So we don't have to account for what we had to account for with this fiscal note, which is the bet credit. So for the newer members, when you have a BPT liability, you can offset that liability by the bet paid. That's a credit against your BPT, and then you pay the net difference. So what we needed to look at, because the bet rate is being reduced, the bet liability is being reduced, meaning the bet credit to offset the BPT is then reduced. Hopefully I haven't lost anybody yet. So we had to look at what would the BPT impact be if there was a credit that was reduced. So less money on file to reduce that BPT liability based on less bet credit on file. So we looked at taxpayers whose BPT, taxpayers who have a bet credit on file against their BPT liability, and what would they have paid in tax year 18 if that bet credit was reduced by the new rate. So essentially what their bet liability would look like as a bet credit at the new rate, because it would be less. So looking at that reduced bet credit increases the BPT, and that increase flows through to the 2.8 impact in fiscal year 22 and the 8.1 additional revenue in fiscal year 23.
And would you explain why it's not a 1-for-1?
It's not a one-for-one because not all taxpayers bet exceeds their BPT. So some taxpayers just file bet and the bet credit is not going to reduce their BPT. So those taxpayers were taken out of the pool because they have no BPT liability to be increased because of a less credit. So those people came out, and also people whose bet credit exceeds their BPT liability. Those people are removed as well because the bet credit is already greater than the BPT liability, so they're not paying BPT again.
And that works out to be about 60%.
Yep, 61%. You're correct.
What were the numbers for the BET going down? A number of us don't have these pages.
Oh, sure. So
Accessible to us.
Sure. The bet credit, the bet rate reduction would be a I'm going to round 4.7 million loss in 22. And in 23, it's a $13.3 million loss for the bet credit. And then I'll just repeat, that's then offset by the BPT increase in fiscal year 22 of 2.8 million. And in fiscal year 23, the BPT increase of 8.1 million. So the net impact, if you'd like that, for fiscal year 22 for the rate reduction, so that's the bet decrease minus the BPT increase, is 1.8 million in 22, 5.2 million in fiscal year 23. In anticipation of Representative Ames's question, this does flow through to fiscal year 24 as well.
Okay. Further questions of Melissa? Seeing none, we can move on. Next is sections 102 to 105, which limits the amount of credit allowed against overpayment of the business profits tax and the business enterprise tax.
Can we hear from the DRA how this works?
Melissa, would you want to explain this?
Sure. So this one is a new fiscal impact I don't believe you guys have seen. So just to take a step back, I know most of the committee is familiar with the credit carryover concept, but I'll explain that real quick just as a base knowledge. So a credit carryover is when a taxpayer overpays their tax liability and has extra funds on file that they can either receive as a refund or a credit to carry over to the next year's liability. So in this scenario, this is looking at that credit that they're carrying over to the next year's liability. So looking at the bill, this credit is trying to reduce that outstanding credit that's sitting on file by 50% of the taxpayer's prior liability. So there is about, for tax year, looking at tax year 2018, it's about $279.7 million in credit carryovers sitting on file.
How much?
279.7 million.
Keeps growing.
It does keep growing, sitting on file to be utilized to offset future tax liabilities for taxpayers. And taxpayers do use this in different ways by either reducing some of their estimate payments. Some taxpayers Some taxpayers keep it on file as a safety net. And there's other options as why they have it on there. So what HB2 is doing is saying it wants to limit that credit carryover on file to 50% of the taxpayer's tax liability. So it wouldn't let taxpayers carry more than 50% of their liability forward each year.
Would that mean that it automatically get a refund?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
And what do you anticipate that buildup is going to, or this law is going to do to that buildup? Where it's built up to 279, when this law goes in, is it going to be less?
Yeah, so I think the purpose of this is to make that credit sitting on file much less than what it is today.
That would be like a one-time event, really, because then let's say they have to refund $50 million. That's going to be a hit to total revenues.
Right. So you're right, Representative Major. It is a hit to the revenues. However, it could be spread out based on how taxpayers use this outstanding credit, because they could, instead of waiting for a refund at the end of the fiscal year, they could just not make estimate payments and have the estimate payments eat up that credit carryover on file.
Do you have any idea what this law, what the level would be once this law goes into effect?
We do. We have tried to analyze it. So I do want to, there's ranges, because it's hard to determine, having never implemented a law like this, it's hard to determine what exactly the fiscal impact will be. So I can give you the range for each fiscal year and tell you what the maximum fiscal impact would be at the end.
We can be pleased or scared like heck. Go ahead, Jim.
So would you like me to give you the ranges?
That would be good. How many ranges do you have?
I have a range for each fiscal year from 22 to 25, or I can just give you the full fiscal impact. You tell me what's easier to digest.
Well, there's only 3 sets of ranges. Why don't you give them?
Okay, so for fiscal year 22, this would be a scenario where they either don't adjust their estimates or they do adjust their estimates. So it would be between, if they don't adjust their estimates, it would be 0 to 30.2 million.
Okay. In 23?
In 23, it would be between 4.9 and 84.5.
Wow. Okay. In 24?
In 24, it would be 20.6 to 107 million.
And this would be the excess.
Yes, that's correct.
That would have to be refunded. Wow.
Who thought this was a good idea? That's my reaction. Well, why would we want to give the money back?
I've always been scared of this. And it looks like we're forcing it ourselves for this thing to happen.
We're shooting ourselves in the foot, but that's okay. Okay, is there one more year?
There is, and then in 25, it's 0 to 25.4 million.
Okay, so now the hump is over.
Yeah, so the total fiscal impact, depending on how taxpayers adjust within there, would not exceed 137.3 million. And I do want to note, we are still working on the fiscal note for this piece. So this is our estimate as of today.
Wow. Who came up with this?
Representative Major, this is Assistant Commissioner Carolyn Lear. I think this is a natural extension of some of the conversations that the state has been required to have over the last few years about booking a liability relative to outstanding CCOs.
I agree to get this down, but wow, I was always afraid once this is going to happen. Wow, at least you're not talking about $200 million in one whack. All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could I still don't understand exactly what we're doing on, are we talking about the entire credit that they already have backed up, or are we talking about the credit, which I thought we were talking about, the credit that they acquire in a single year?
Representative Almy, this is Carolyn again. This would impact credits that are on file today, and it would also prevent the additional accumulation of credits going forward. So it would be both.
So if,
go ahead, Representative.
sorry. So if you had on $5 million on file there, you would have to get 2.5 of it back in a refund in the single year? Is that?
Depending on your last year's liability, yes. So if their last year's liability was $5 million and they have a $5 million credit on file, then yes, they would have to receive a $2.5 million refund. The department would not allow them to continue to carry that full $5 million credit on their taxpayer account.
Wow. Could we spread this out over 10 years or something?
That's a good question, Representative. I think that there are absolutely options that we could discuss with the committee to ease into the fiscal impact if that's something that you would like to see from us.
Well, I think I'd like to see those numbers. Because they're talking in 23 and 24, those could end up being a horrible hits. Right? On 24, it could be as much as getting rid of the interest and dividend tax in 1 year. All right.
Could we also consider two statements, one for what they're having credit this year and a different percentage required to take off from past?
Representative, this is Carolyn again. I think the difficulty with that is that if not statutorily, at least in our administrative rules, we always account for the oldest money first. So, and that's, consistent with generally accepted accounting principles. So the CCO that's on their account is always, or almost always, new. It's only for the very, very largest dollar values of CCOs that would save you anything. Because we're always using the taxpayers' old money first to pay their liability.
Mr. Chair, there are a number of people with hands up. I just put my hand up and I noticed that. And
I go there.
I should be at the back of the line.
I was just going to go there. And so that the first one is, here's the order, would be Abrami, Yurley, Spilsbury, and yourself. So Representative Abrami.
Yeah, Norm, I think we really got to do something about this one. I think when we talk to finance, I mean, this is going to be quite a hit in definitely in 23 and 24, but 23 is within the budget year they're trying to deal with. Wow. I think we should I mean, we should give them the number as it is, but then say, maybe we need to modify this HB2 line and move this and spread it out over a longer period of time. But I mean, I have a question for Carolyn then. So you're saying that the auditors, who's telling us to do this? The auditors?
Oh, no, we weren't, this was was within the governor's proposal. So I think it's fair to say that it comes from the governor's office. I don't believe that the auditors directed us to do this. I think it was just a proposed solution to what has been an ongoing issue.
And if you don't do this, it could be if the big guys got together and said, hey, we want a refund on our money right now. And there's like $279 million and $220 million is from these guys. That would be devastating.
But Norm, anybody can ask for a refund right now. No one's twisting their arms to say to keep that money. Individual companies that are saying keep the money for whatever reason.
I know there's a possibility that this could happen.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I've always been afraid of that. Let's go on, Representative Yurley.
Thank you. That following up with what Representative Abrami had just said, the language on this needs to be going forward. And I don't know how we write that. I don't mind limiting it. It's a good idea, and it should have been limited some time ago. I mean, we've discussed this year after year after year, and businesses have been just taking this as a in the bank type of thing for a rainy day fund, if you will. So, Carolyn, if the state were to say what you have now is lost money, that would open up the state to a bunch of suits, I believe. A lot of suits, and all the money would have to be regurgitated at one time. Should the wording be going forward, no more shall apply, and any credits due will be taken from the credits already paid? Is something like that. Would that be more appropriate?
Representative, I think because this bill has an applicability date, that is essentially what it does. It applies to, gosh, I should have it right in front of me, but I believe it's taxable periods ending on or after December 31st, 2022. But Melissa, you can jump in if I'm misspeaking there. So it really will only apply to credits that are being carried forward going forward. I think the issue that Representative Almy brought up is that there's this large volume of old credits going forward. And is there some way to prevent the massive fiscal impact when the bill takes effect? And I think the only way to effectively do that is to modify the percentage measuring point that you're using because of how we account for credits in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Every time a taxpayer files a return, the credit essentially becomes a new credit.
To follow up on that, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
What you're saying then is that unless something like this bill takes place, the credit is going to continue to accumulate, at least on paper, forever. And it will keep multiplying like rabbits if we don't put some sort of limit on it someplace. Did I get that?
Absent some sort of modification in taxpayer behavior, I think it is likely that the credit will at least stay the same. For whatever reason, we have some mostly larger taxpayers that carry large credits on their account. And for whatever reason, they don't choose to take a refund and they don't choose to modify down their estimated tax payments. And as a result, that credit just sits there. And I don't know that we have any signal that taxpayers are going to change that behavior right now.
I agree. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Representative Spilsbury, followed by Representative Ames and Bernstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we're all trying to untangle this because there's several different perspectives of looking at the same number. I'm certainly trying to. But there's a difference between your balance sheet perspective versus your cash flow perspective. When I look at this, I guess I'm wondering what the treasurer has to say about the impact on liquidity if there was suddenly a call in the amounts at the higher end of the range for 23 and 24. But from a budgeting perspective, am I correct in thinking that this is really not a factor? It's a neutral. These are effectively prepayments against future liability. But when we budget, we're not budgeting according to what people overpay in their estimates and accumulates. We're budgeting based on the anticipated liability, the net actual tax. So if I've got it right, I'd like to hear from the treasurer, but I don't think there's a budget impact. There's a cash flow impact.
Carolyn or Melissa?
I do think that question is best posed to the treasurer. I will say that we count those dollars, those credits that are sitting on taxpayer accounts are recognized in revenue in the year that they're received, even though they will be used to pay a tax liability in a later year, theoretically. So I think that is sort of the crux of the issue as to why this is potentially a problem. The CCO issue is a problem from a state annual financial report situation, and is why we've had to book a liability in the past to reflect that fact.
Hey, Chris, can you get the treasurer to meet with us next Wednesday?
Yeah, I can invite her. Yep.
You bring up a good point, Representative Spilsbury, and this whole thing scares the heck out of me.
Well, and it's just to make an analogy to business, it sounds like this is being dealt with on a cash accounting basis, essentially, rather than an accrual basis.
Right. If the cash is in the door, they'll spend it. Or they could spend it if they wanted. Representative Bernstein and Ames and Southworth, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, everything I had to say has pretty much been said already. This is an election by the taxpayer. It's really an interest-free loan to the state. Maybe the reason why it's growing on a nominal basis so much is we're in a very low interest rate environment, so the opportunity cost is pretty low, letting the state take your keep your money. It's just the pain that we're going to endure just seems unnecessary by having to refund this money. I don't know. I'll be interested to hear what the treasurer has to say next week. I really don't have a question, but thank you for letting me ramble.
Representative Ames.
Yeah, thank you. To a significant extent, my question was answered by the question asked by Representative Spilsbury. I was going to put it as, but I, from what Carolyn Lear just said, the question, my answer to my rhetorical question is not the same. I was going to say, isn't this really a Department of Treasury issue rather than a revenue issue? But I now I think I understand that this money that's left by the taxpayer, that's essentially what's happening, left by the taxpayer with DRA is being counted as revenue.
Yes.
Which I think is the crux of the problem. It's not, it's the taxpayers' money that's sitting up there. And somebody else referred to it as a interest-free loan by the taxpayer to the state, I think. That's what it looks like to me. So if the taxpayer pulls down some of that money to apply against new tax liability, that's revenue to the state. But if the taxpayer pulls that down into whatever, his own account, then it shouldn't be lost revenue to the state. It should be less money that the Department of Treasury has available to calculate, what it needs to calculate in terms of cash flow. So it's sort of a quandary we're in, as far as I can see, and we've got a pattern of practice that has been followed by DRA for a long time. Maybe I'm completely misunderstanding this, by the way. I'm no expert in accounting. And the specter of having so much money sitting in our account that has been, I don't know how to describe it. There's so much money sitting there that when it moves in the wrong direction could mess up the state, is what we're contending with. But I really don't understand why this is a revenue issue.
Representative Southworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We often get wide ranges at this point when we're looking at things. I'm just wondering if we look at the middle of the DRA's range, the hump might not seem as terrible, but am I correct that after that hump is passed, things are going to be much more predictable and we're going to be safe from the risk that you've been talking about, Chairman Major, for some time? So is it a little bit like tearing the bandage off or whatever, and maybe we do want to spread it out longer, but will it in fact get us to a better place in the end?
Carolyn?
Representative, I think the ripping the Band-Aid off analogy is a good one. I think that what were you to do this, it would be a one-time impact, and then going forward, we would simply no longer allow the significant accumulation of CCOs on file. So in that way, the problem would be permanently solved.
Thank you.
I agree. Representative Spilsbury.
Yes, thank you. This further discussion just prompts in my mind that this is a moving target we're looking at. And it would be interesting to see what this figure has been, maybe over a monthly basis for the last 3 years. And I'm just wondering several things that might answer. Like, we've seen a surge of business tax revenues over the estimates for this past year. And is that in part due to an escalation of prepayments, or is it truly that business taxes are generating more revenue? What's the net?
This has been growing every year over quite a few years. As far as growth goes, as far as the rest of your question, Carolyn?
I'm hoping Melissa will answer this question because she performs this calculation. I do think it definitely, the number fluctuates. So perhaps she could give a more detailed answer than I could. But if not, tell me so, Melissa.
No, thank you, Carolyn. We do report this in the tax expenditure report every year on a fiscal year basis for those of you interested. I can pull that up as we speak to let you know the growth. Representative Spilsbury, it's a great question of saying what is happening now. Are they overpaying their liability and the CCO is going to increase because they're just keeping that funds on file, or is it a net decrease? And that's hard to tell until all returns are filed. If there's no way to know what those taxpayers are doing on a monthly basis with those estimates, if it's an overpayment or underpayment until the returns are filed. So just looking at to give you some perspective for credit carryovers on file, I have in front of me, which is in our tax expenditure report, fiscal year 16. It was 173.4 million. Fiscal year 17, it did decrease to 171.8 million. And then from fiscal year 17 on, it has increased. Fiscal year 18, 196 million. 19, fiscal year 19 was a big jump to 268.1 million. And then fiscal year 20 is 271.6 million. Just to give you some historical trends.
Okay. Next is Representative. Are you all set, Representative Spilsbury? Representative Almy, followed by Representative Bromley.
Thank you. I think it's pretty clear that we booked this money years ago and we spent this money in budgets. So it is a revenue issue. The question is how we get out of this, and we have been in this situation for 2 decades at least, and probably longer than that. And I think we do need to look at percentages of what percentage would have to be refunded growing over a number of years, whether that would help in the distribution of the pain. But I did want to ask if maybe we could try to approach Bill Ardinger, who presumably talked to the governor about this, and maybe the head of the Society of CPAs about, we've never really explored this that I know of, why some of the businesses are keeping the money there. One of our ideas earlier was that if they had to pay it to get it all back suddenly, they were going to have to pay higher taxes at the federal level. The federal taxes have gone down somewhat, considerably. But if maybe we could get an idea from them of why this is being kept, it might help more to figure out how much of it is going to disappear when.
We did have a discussion a number of years ago of why they were doing that. And I think it was what they would have to pay on taxes if they got it back out. But Representative Bromley, would you take over for a few minutes? I've got to drop off.
The next question. Am I the next person asking a question?
He wants you to take over the committee.
Oh, yeah, I am. I know. But I guess I'm next to ask the question. So this is for Chris Shea. We all look at the revenue focus every month. And my understanding that revenue focus is a cash document. So if credit carryovers in a particular month exceed what they were the prior month, that would show as a positive income or positive revenue. It'll show as a positive in the revenue focus report. Now, something magical happens. My understanding is at the end of the year, where accrual accounting does come in play somehow. Can you just give us a quickie on that? In terms of what we look at every month is cash. And when it comes-
Correct.
When we look at the credit carryover, that reflects any delta change from one month to another. Is that correct?
So you're dealing on a cash basis every month that you look at the revenue focus. And at the end of the year, they do a modified accrual. And that's where there's a reconciliation that's performed against the carry credit forward, which as Deputy Commissioner Lear has mentioned, there's been some questions over the years on how that's done. And, is there a better way to do that between the auditors, DRA and treasurer and the comptroller's office. But I can't give you a whole lot more than that. It's kind of out of my expertise area. It's really something I would defer to Carolyn if she's got more insight, or we could have one of our auditors come on board to talk to you, or even the comptroller.
And I think, yeah, I know we asked for the treasurer, possibly the comptroller may be helpful too, so.
Yeah, I can invite her as well and see if they could be on the call together, maybe on Wednesday when you guys are meeting.
Yep, okay. Norm is back, I'll let Norm.
Yeah.
indicate whether that's-
Why don't we put it on the first thing to do on Wednesday?
Although Wednesday, we're oh, that's right, we're having hearings on Tuesday.
Hearings on those 6 Senate bills on Tuesday. And we're going to dedicate ourselves to revenues on Wednesday and Thursday. Okay. There's no more hands on this. Any further questions? Representative Nunes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a freshman on this committee, so I just want to make sure I've got all of the facts straight on this issue that we're talking about. I've got some statements and questions I just want to run over here, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But when we talk about whose money this is the taxpayer money that we're talking about, correct?
Correct.
And it's a credit carryover, which is an overpayment by the taxpayer against their tax liability from an estimate that they used, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it can only be used to offset the liability on the business tax payment, correct?
We need to get it.
The money that is in this account for each of the overpayment by the taxpayer, by the business taxpayer, right? What's sitting out there in overpayment that they can use to offset their tax payment can only be used for this purpose, correct?
What's
in the account can only be used to offset the business tax, correct?
We need to get that squared away with the treasurer.
Okay. Can it be used for anything else by the state while it's sitting in this account?
That needs to be answered by the treasurer.
Okay. And my last is more of a statement. Why is the overpayment portion of this reported as revenue? I'm done.
Okay, and we do a cash basis. And then from the cash basis, that's what we see as revenue. Now the accountants take over after that. So it'd be nice to get this squared away with the treasurer.
I think there is an issue here.
Okay, Representative Alamy. You're muted, Susan.
While you were going on, we established it might be good to have the comptroller as well. And I still think it might be worth trying to talk with Bill Ardinger, since he represents a lot of the big businesses, if he'd talk to us.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
I mean,
the comptroller and the treasurer. And then after we understand, then we can talk to Bill Ardinger.
the important thing for Representative Nunes is that this has been recognized as an issue for a while. These credit carryovers are getting so large. I think Representative Major and others have been very concerned about this. Now we got a proposal for a solution. The only question we're trying to address now is if reducing this by 50% in 1 year or whatever, it looked like there's going to be some impact in over a couple of years that are significant. Are those cash impacts? I think part of the answer is yes. We're going to be writing checks back to people. We're going to be writing checks going the other way. And that's going to be minus revenue the way we seem to do our revenue. So, but we're going to verify all of that. So yes, this is an issue that's been out there, and but all of a sudden we find in HB2 a solution, and that we're trying to grapple with this. Is the solution going to be, how painful is that solution going to be to our revenues?
Yeah, I've been after the DRA on this for years, the various commissioners. I on somebody who did it.
Ames is up.
On who?
Representative Ames' is hands up.
Representative Ames.
I think Representative Bernstein beat me to it.
Representative Bernstein.
Thank you, Representative Ames, and thank you, Mr. Chair. If we're willing to, and I hate to beat this, but it really is a fascinating discussion, but I don't mean to beat a dead horse. If we're willing to refund the money to the taxpayer, then we're willing to put the money in escrow to ease concerns about a mad rush of everyone asking for refunds. But by automatically refunding this money, we sort of take a tool out of the accountant's toolkit to minimize New Hampshire businesses' federal tax liability. So it's just something we should consider. I look forward to continuing the discussion, but there's a lot of angles to this.
Representative Jajigian, followed by Representative Ames.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The idea of the federal tax burden being increased by getting the refund confuses me a bit, because when I do my taxes, if I don't ask for a refund, I still get a 1099-G the next year, and that can add to my federal tax liability. So I could be wrong, but I don't think whether it's refunded or not affects the federal tax liability, at least in my own experience. So I guess I would like to hear also whether that's true or not.
And that's a good question, because when they pay their taxes, that means that tax is deducted from their earnings federally. And if they get a refund, then they have to put it back in and pay the taxes on it. And it'd be nice to know if that's the correct interpretation of this. Representative Ames.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this discussion has been great, and it's revealed that this language has an impact. If it's not changed, it will have an impact, and it's a negative impact on revenues the way it's being expressed right now. So that needs to be understood and factored in if it or it needs to be changed. So we need to get on top of this pretty quickly.
You don't know how well I feel when I hear you say that. Susan smiles, but she knows I've been at it for many years on this credit carryover. Anything else on this credit carryover? If not, let us move on. Next has to do with section 135 to 136. which provides that proceeds from the sale that resulted from money provided by the highway fund for payback of real property purchased with federal funds shall be credited to the Department of Transportation for the purpose of meeting federal obligations or reimbursing the highway fund for payments of federal obligations. Chris, you want to elaborate?
So what I think all they're trying to do there is include federal. So essentially what happens when the DOT disposes of property and it gets approved by the long range committee is that if it was bought with highway funds or turnpike funds, it goes back to that home fund. In some cases, they have a matching federal dollar and the feds have allowed them to hold that money. And I think they're just trying to incorporate that into the statute that allows them to dispose of property, that if they do have something that was bought with federal money and it's allowable, they could deposit it into one of their accounts, be it the highway fund, turnpike fund, or a separate account.
So what I see on this item is the only way it could affect revenues to the highway is if they had other things that they could sell that would go, the proceeds would go directly to the highway fund, and that is something that the highway department should be managing. I don't see where it affects us.
No, I would agree, Representative Major. It's just a way for them to kind of retain the federal dollar that they might still be allowed to spend.
Yeah.
Still have to account for it. It's not going to help your revenues anywhere, particularly. And, you know, it might match a highway fund purchase. They might get permission to do that. But I think they just wanted to be clear that when they do have federal dollars associated with a property, that they're holding it back, that they're just so it's accounted for.
All right. I don't see any questions, so we can move on. The next is 62, which is section 145. Establish a body worn and dashboard camera fund. That's strictly up to the legislation, the appropriators. And if they do, then it would be something that would be monitored by the dedicated fund. Next item is section 163 to 164. Amend the regenerative manufacturing program into the workforce development student debt relief program. Makes various changes to the program regarding definition, eligibility, and establish a commission to oversee the program. Chris, what do you know about this?
I know nothing about this.
Neither do I.
Unfortunately, I can't help you with this at all. I'd have to ask one of our budget guys who's been working with Division 2 of House Finance to see what information they have related to this.
Could you, and then get back to us?
Yep.
Is there, Susan, did you have any other items in House Bill 2?
Can I come back to this one? Because I believe that what the governor is doing is taking the arms fund that we spent quite a lot of time on, the regenerative manufacturing program, and making it broadly into a workforce development program. And one of the problems that we had with that was that they wanted $5 million to be spent in student debt relief, which is mentioned here, for the arms fund so that they'd have more people coming in to it. They wanted the New Hampshire Business Finance Authority to find a way to get the money to spend on this. And when it left our hands, and for a year after when I was following up, they hadn't figured out a way to get that money. So the question is, do we have anything to do with this since it came out of our committee in the first place? Or do we just leave it to someone else to try to figure out how you find money to pay for it?
Well, Chris is going to find out what do they want to do here, what this is about. I know that when we had the regenerative manufacturing, we set aside $5 million for tuition refund for those people that are going to be employed in the regenerative manufacturing as tuition refunds. I think we need to get more information before we can go any further with this. And we'll try to have that available for Wednesday. Did you, when you looked at House Bill 2, did you have any other items in addition to what's been put together by John?
Well, there was a question which we can probably leave to the dedicated fund program committee on about the state heating system, but it's probably okay. The thing that on there, the Department of Education is supposed to accept gifts and bequests to fund New Hampshire scholars for an accounting unit, which ought to be a dedicated fund. And there is in the index a reference to a transfer to the Education Trust Fund, which is actually a transfer from the Education Trust Fund to the Public School Infrastructure Fund, which was created in 2017. And there are a lot of errors in that drafting. I don't know if the LBAO is working on that, aside from the first error, which is the index reference. But those were the main other things. I do think we ought to tell them about the 612s, but rather than leave it to be cleaned up later. But I can do that myself.
Okay, has anybody else in looking at House Bill 2 come up with any items we haven't discussed relative to that's going to affect revenues?
Norm, I've had my hand up.
Representative Bromley.
Well, yeah, just on that advanced regenerative manufacturing first. I mean, Jennifer has a footnote here that says this isn't typical Ways and Means policy change, but she just included it because we were so involved with regenerative manufacturing, which brings me to, may not be a bad idea when things slow down a bit in maybe April and May, that we invite Army over to give us an update on how the whole advanced regenerative manufacturing program is going. This is an aside from this, so that just triggered that thought.
That's a good idea.
So, but here's my thing, that the one other thing they had on the sheet was the addition of two of DRA auditors. And there was a positive revenue impact from that. Not on the sheet that Jennifer generated, but on the budget sheet that we worked off about a month ago. So they talked about a $0.7 million increase in revenue in 22 and $3.2 million increase in revenue in 23. The question I have is, is this something we want to report, verify, and then report to finance? I think it should be myself, but this is like because they're the ones who are going to finalize whether they're going to approve those additional auditor positions for DRA.
Yeah, and there are different categories of auditors, and the amount was 700,000 in 22 and 3.2 million in 23.
Right. I mean, DRA could explain that if you want them to, or we could just accept that.
Melissa or Carolyn?
Carolyn Lear, Assistant Commissioner at the Department of Revenue. The two additional auditor positions were specifically, I believe, multi-state auditors. These are the auditors that audit our largest business, the largest multinational businesses. And we did provide those revenue estimates, smaller in year one because of the training requirements and the amount of time that it takes for auditors to get up to speed. But those are also our highest revenue producing auditors because of the size of the company that they typically audit. So a much larger impact in year two. But those numbers were directly from us based on our estimates, based on prior experience.
All right, and that's a total of 5 positions, but the heavy positions are the national auditors.
That's right. I believe we typically expect them to generate around $1 million to $1.5 million in revenue a year once they're up and running. And Lindsay did present, I'm sorry, Commissioner Stepp did present yesterday to Division 1 in-house finance and gave them this information as well. So they do have the information about the expected revenue from those positions.
So they have these numbers.
They do.
Okay. Anybody else in looking at House Bill 2 or legislation you feel can affect revenue that could possibly be used in House Bill 2? All right, I think we did all right this morning. Does anybody else have anything else they want to bring up?
We're going to deal with single sales factor today?
What's that?
We're going to deal with single sales factor today?
Oh, yeah. Did you want to do that right now or take a break?
It's up to the group. If it's the last thing, maybe we should just get it done.
Okay, then let's do that. Since we have the DRA here.
You want me to introduce this? Norm?
Yeah, I want to grab my folder on it. Here we go. Go ahead, Representative Bromley.
So Ways and Means passed House Bill 281 a month or so ago. It went on consent calendar. It was 22-0 vote. That was to move out the date of single sales factor from taxable periods ending on or after December 31st, 2022, moving that out to December 31st of 2026. And that way we would have more time to evaluate the impact of market-based sourcing before we took the next step to single sales factor. And this was all as a result of House Bill 4, the last budget, where the Senate put in single sales factor. We never really had hearings on it, et cetera. So, and we're as a House, Ways and Means, we tend to be a little more conservative about some of these things and want more proof, I guess. But when we did our revenue estimates, I think most of us, and I can recall the conversations, were cognizant of House Bill, of single sales factor going into play, especially in fiscal 2023. And I think our estimates were based on that. Now, in conversations with Lynn Ober, once she understood House Bill 281, said that, well, why don't we just put 281 in House Bill 2? But if we were to do that, what would that have, what impact would that have on the business taxes, especially for fiscal 2023? Now I said, well, look, I can only give you my opinion, but we can meet as a committee to talk about this. I know when I looked at my numbers that I used, that I factored in monies for, I say, reduced my estimates for 2023 because of single sales factor. So what I'd like to if we can, as a group today, come to a consensus as to, first, do we think that if we put this 281 into the House Bill 2, basically delaying the single sales factor, would people feel comfortable and also increasing our revenue estimates for 23? That's the question on the table. And you got to remember that the DRA's low estimate was 840.1 million, and the high was, this is then, they increased it since then, but I think we got to go back to what we were working with a month ago. The high was 899.8. But when we took the Democrat average and the Republican average, came up with 840 million. So we were at the absolute low end of the DRA number. Okay, now normally we don't go that low. And I think part of the reason we want that low is because of single sales factor. I did quiz DRA the other day about their estimates, their original estimates of 840.1 to 899.8. And they did not factor in anything for single sales factor. Okay, so basically, because they felt it was indeterminable, and they could speak for themselves on this, but that there'd be years that it would be good and years that may be bad. But I know as a committee, we took the view that it was going to be bad in terms of reducing revenues. Now, you can all correct me that I was wrong in that statement, but I know personally I did. And my recollection of the conversations, I think others did as well. So, I mean, I think if we took it as let's pose one number so we can have a conversation around it. I mean, the midpoint of the DRA's estimate that did not factor in single sales factor, the midpoint was 869.95 million. And if we say we could hit that midpoint, that's about a 29.95 million difference from our estimate that we did. So let's call it 30 million because let's round it. So I think there's something here. If we want, again, the finance is willing to put this in HB2, but they want to know a number. So if we were to do that, would we increase our revenue estimates, assuming there's no single sales factor? So I'd just like to open it to discussion. And, with the fact that that single sales factor would be put on hold for a couple of years, make a difference in folks' revenue estimates.
Well, the DRA came out with revised estimates as of yesterday. And for FY23, they have 847.7 as the low and 907.3 as the high. And in these estimates, Melissa or Carolyn, was there any impact for single sales factor?
Representative Major, this is Carolyn Lear, Assistant Commissioner. There is no accounting for the impact of single sales factor apportionment in our revenue estimates.
And then your percentages that you use from growing from 22 to 21 was 4% on the low and 6% on the high. Then on 22, well, actually, you really need to go right back to 21. 21, your estimate was 817 to 841. And then you grew that by 1% and 3% on the low and the high going to 22. And then another 4% and 6% for the high and low going to 23. And there was no effect on single sales factor at that point in time.
That's correct. Our growth percentages did not take into consideration any impact from single sales factor.
And your revenue estimates that you came out with yesterday was based upon what you know as of yesterday relative to the collection of revenues and the estimates to date and the economy and all these things. You've taken those into account.
The revenue estimates that Melissa sent you yesterday, and she can jump in as well. The only change in those estimates, I believe, was to change February to actual February receipts. Melissa, do you want to jump in and elaborate on that?
And did they take the tax notice out of that?
Sure. For the record, Melissa Rollins, Department of Revenue. Yes, Carolyn is absolutely correct. The only change we did was to remove the February estimate that we had and replace it with actual February. In Representative Major, to your point, I think it was noted in the email that we did remove the anomalous payment out of the base when growing fiscal year 22. We removed $10 million, knowing that that wouldn't continue, or we didn't anticipate that to continue in fiscal year 22. As we did not change any of our further assumptions. We haven't dug into anything. We intend to do that as March comes in and we have some more data.
Okay. And hopefully when we meet on the 18th, you may have some data for March, I hope. And the reason we have to do something by the 18th is because the Finance Committee has to be complete by early the next week.
Mr. Chair, there's two separate issues on the table. There's next week's discussion about any revenue estimate changes. And then there's our discussion today about did we or did we not factor in, if we were to take out single sales factor from our discussion, as in put a hold on it, wouldn't our revenues estimates have been higher when we did our original estimates? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Right. So what you're trying to get is, what did we factor in for a single sales factor in 23?
Right. And I know we must have factored in something, because I know we would not have been at 800 and our combined Republican Democrat average was 840 million, which is the minimum at the DRA level. Why would we we never have done this, where we go to the minimum of what the DRA said at the time, not their new estimates at the time, of 840 million. So it's low, very low. And to me, it was that we were hedging our bets on single sales factor. So if we're going to put a hold on single sales factor, my gut tells me we should be increasing these estimates.
Yes, but the question is how much?
If they put it into HB2, House Bill 281.
And how much did the single sales factor affect our revenue estimate for 23?
Mr. Chairman, you have Representative Spilsbury, and then you have me.
Oh, okay. Representative Spilsbury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Holly. Yeah, just to confirm what Pat is asking, I had the deferral of single sales factor in mind in setting the estimates. So I understand the path he's trying to lead us on, and it makes sense. My freshman question is, I'm not clear as a matter of procedure what the advantages and disadvantages are as to having HB 281 go through the Senate process independently versus getting incorporated into the budget. Is there an advantage, for example, allowing the Finance Committee to bake that into the budget, or what is the issue one way or the other?
What it is they want more revenue by putting into the budget. If they, let's say, if we have factored in $12 million, then since.
So by incorporating it into HB2, that can take account of the revenue effect.
Right. So that
thank you.
For each year, they could raise the revenues that they have to play with by $12 million.
Also answer that question, Norm.
Yes.
The odds of the Senate agreeing with us on 281 is minimal, given that this was their position last year to go to single sales factor. Does this help putting it in HB2? Yeah, it makes it a bigger fight, I guess. You know, the power brokers that are going to ultimately, you know, do whatever they do at the end of this budget negotiation. You know, we could win this fight by having it in HB2, and you know, we're giving the House more money to work with. I know they'll be fighting pretty hard, and the House Finance guys on this to keep this in HB2.
What we need to know is, do we know how much we put into our estimate to account for a single sales factor on FY23? I think we're going to have to go back to our notes. In the meantime, Representative Almy.
Thank you. I actually had an estimate that was 5 million lower than the Democrats put into the heap, went along with the rest of them. It was based on the single sales factor, and it was based on a very conservative version of what happened in 2018, when all of that extra tax money went back to the major corporations that we deal with from the federal government, and we got to tax it. I took half of what that produced, which was 68 million, and then I cut it down to 30, which is exactly what Representative Brahmi was talking about from a different angle, and stuck that loss into my personal estimate. And I do feel that the largest corporations, though we don't know what their mix is, that's the trouble, and DRA can't tell us, but that they have been doing quite well during the pandemic and are positioned to do quite well after the pandemic. And that they are the ones that end up making more than off of this than the small corporations, according to what we were given, that they make 10 million of the loss is given to them alone, and the rest of it is split between the large and the small corporations.
So what was the total loss?
So the total loss that I was using was 30 million, which is what Representative Brahmi came at from a different calculation.
Due to the single sales factor?
Due to the single sales factor. It's been very variable in their calculations in the past. We don't know, and I think I took the 5 million off extra, the 6 million off extra from that, because we get some money back from market-based sourcing that they're pretty sure of, but they haven't. I think that's also not put into the DRA revenue estimate yet, because they haven't got a final calculation on it. So, and I did want to say that I think that having it in HB2 puts the Finance Committee of the House behind this when we go into committee of conference. And they're the ones who get to talk mostly about what happens in that committee of conference and make the decisions. And I'm hoping that if we can get a hearing in the Senate, that maybe with the information from 2018, that they will be feeling more cautious, as Senator D'Alessandro seemed to be feeling more cautious when we had those that special committee in November.
Okay, Representative Ames.
Thank you. Yeah, I really hope that House Finance will put into House Bill 2 this delay of the single sales factor. And I do think, at least in my case, the likelihood that single sales factor would be a negative factored into my personal input into that group calculation that we did as a negative. I think that I would hope that it would be possible, Representative Major, to convey to the Finance Committee the sense of this committee, not the sense, the conviction of this committee that a single sales factor delay will be a positive for revenue without getting into providing a number, at least until after we've done a calculation that looks at the whole picture. Because I know when I was doing my estimates, I was, the single sales factor was a negative, but there were positives, and it all sort of comes together in combined calculation in a way that's hard to repeat. We're going to be trying to do that next week, I think. And yet we need to communicate with finance now. Why couldn't we do it in this more sort of general way? If indeed what I just said about the committee's position is accurate.
Can you attribute a certain amount just to the single sales factor?
Well, I'm hesitant to do that, but I wouldn't say 30 million. If it would be in the positive terrain, and be $5 or $10 million, but it might be more after we do a group discussion on it.
Lynn Ober seems to think it's 12.9 million. Where did she get that number from?
What was that, 12.9?
12.9 million. With a single sales factor.
Who did? Lynn Ober? Who?
Lynn Ober. Chris. Is Chris still with us?
I am just trying to unmute. I don't know where Representative Ober got the number of 12.9, but that sounds like the historical racing number. So we'd have to check in with her on that.
You're right. It's the historical racing. They want to put that in the House Bill too. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, 12.9 is close to the average loss over 14 to 17 before they had the data for 18. before market-based sourcing, which is the key problem.
So the 12.9 is associated with historic racing. Okay. All right, we have some work to do.
Can't we give them some kind of a range though, Norm? They're gonna want a number tomorrow. If they're gonna do this, I don't know, if we don't give them a number, they may not do it unless they can wait for a week. What were you saying, Representative Ames, that as we do a more detailed dive on Wednesday and Thursday, that we keep this in the back of our minds as we're going through this? And you would feel more comfortable at the end of next week estimating the impact in your mind of single sales factor?
Yeah, I don't know what to say. What the data that we have is the historical data that Representative Almy has pointed to, which has different numbers by year, very substantial numbers in the most recent year that are above the number we're talking about. Then we got market-based sourcing coming into the picture and confusing things. It does add up for me, sort of also based on my understanding of the role of manufacturing and sort of businesses that are likely to pay less tax with single sales factor. It all adds up to a negative. How much of a negative? I wish I knew. But if you're asking for a number, why not 12.9? No, I don't know. You know, it's that arbitrary. But 12.9 or 10, I'd say I'd round at 10 would be to me a comfortable number.
What would you Pat?
I think it is in the 30 million range, but I mean, we could put it lower. Give them a range of 10 to 20 or something like that.
I'm comfortable with that.
I think they're going to have a number that they can put into the surplus statement. Even though we don't know what it is, we're going to have to give them a number, just like we did for the revenue estimate.
Chris, did they talk about a number at all for this?
I don't know what the discussions has been about this single sales factor and adding the bill in, but Representative Almy is correct in the sense that the Finance Committee want a single number. If you provided a range, they would probably take the midpoint of the range to add to a surplus statement, or they might take the high point of the range if they're looking for revenue. So if you want to control that to some extent, you may want to provide a single number. If you want to give them the ability to kind of choose between the range, then you can provide a range. I think it's just an ongoing discussion right now. And I think that I was under the impression that some of the division chairs were waiting on this committee to make some decisions around what the impact might be if they added that bill to House Bill 2.
How about somebody else wants to give their opinion? I don't know if they have their notes in front of them. Representative Elliott. They're muted.
I got it. Well, I've heard the 30 million figure, and I've heard the $10 million figure. And I'm just wondering if we could all agree on splitting the difference and making it a figure of $20 million.
Representative Southworth.
Yes, that's what I was thinking as well. Again, there are many, many variables to consider, but that seems like a reasonable compromise, 20 million.
Representative Southwood, no,
Pillsbury.
okay, Representative Spilsbury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I truly feel like I'm stabbing in the dark on this one. 10 million I'd feel comfortable with, 20 million I'd go along with. But the echo that keeps going on in my mind as we're having this discussion is those carry forwards. And the idea that effectively people are going to be asked to chip those down, whether it's a refund check or whether it's lowering their estimates. So I hope that's part of this discussion as well.
Okay. Anybody else?
Could I just say that these are separate discussions that all add up to a number at the end? The carry forward issue is going to also, I hope it's going to be at least amended, but we really don't want to put it off too much longer.
No.
Why don't we just go with the 20 million? And you know, others haven't weighed in. I mean, they all have to. Yeah.
Let's go with the 20 million for now and let us review it next week. And so that our number would be, instead of what was it, 840?
Yeah.
It would be 60.1.
What would it be? Instead of 840?
It was 840.1. We're going to raise it by 20. So it'd be
860.
Yeah, and just call it 860.
But the economic situation has been changing also. So the base may change next week.
There isn't anything that I see in economics that is turning negative right now. Not anything. So
I agree with that.
So as a starter,
What did you say? What did you say, Mr. Chairman?
I haven't heard of anything at this point in time, economic-wise, that's trending negative.
Thank you.
Which means we may want to raise our base.
Yes, and we'll talk about that Wednesday and Thursday. So do your homework between now and then. And by your homework, it means just don't look at the numbers. Look at the papers. Look at magazines. Listen to the economists. Listen to the business people. Listen. Job report. All that. All right. Anything else you want to bring up today? Then we'll call it quits for the day. And we've got the afternoon off.
And so next week we're meeting on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Tuesday is a public hearing on the Senate, on the 6 Senate bills that have come over. So what you need to do is download those bills, look them over prior to the public hearing on Tuesday. And Wednesday, we'll primarily be meeting with the DRA, the treasurer and the comptroller, and probably have Arbinger come in. Then Thursday, we may continue with the people that we talked with, if we still need them. And then anybody else that we need to bring in, agents, other types of agency heads.
Representative Major,
Yes.
that amendment on 614, the one that was supposed to be voted on, can we have a copy of that?
That was sent by Representative Vose.
Yeah, I don't have a copy.
Appropriate one to us already?
No,
I think he said.
let's ask for it. I'm not sure. I do know what's in it, but you're absolutely right. We need to make sure we get that that amendment.
I'll get that amendment out. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Make a note right now.
Woolery has his hand up.
Thank you. Representative Woolery.
Thank you. With Mary being, it would ring just then. With Mary being sick, should we get together in some fashion and send her a card or some flowers? I'll be glad to undertake that from the committee. Would the committee like to do something like that?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yes.
Yes.
How do we get money to you? We can't pass the hat these days.
Don't worry about it until session. No big deal. What do you,
You put it in the
Sherry
credit
berries.
carryover fund.
Yeah. Do you want to do Sherry's berries or just plain flowers, or what would you guys like to do?
Trust you.
Yes.
Is she allergic to strawberries?
I don't think so.
Representative Major, I just looked quickly for his email and it has amendment 222H.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right, I'll take care of that and put it from the committee then. Thank you.
I'll have Jen look up that amendment and get it out to the members of the committee.
Yeah, all right.
We did in that case get it from Representative Vose, but it's back several emails from.
It was yesterday.
I printed a copy of it out. I do have it. I have it.
In the email.
The 222, because we do have it if
Yeah,
that's.
0222H.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you say that there is nothing negative on the economic front, we have the country split exactly in two on the opinion of.
On the what?
We have a bill that has half the Congress not supporting it and half supporting it. I think there's a lot to discuss. It's a very different economic package that we're facing.
And we will be discussing that stimulus.
I think it's and this state is quite split.
A lot of states are split.
Well, but
as
I only have to think about New Hampshire.
far as the economic output, what's happening, more the unemployment's coming down, the number of jobs going up, the more businesses are opening, people are spending money, the personal income is up, stock market's up, and a number of other indicators are in the positive direction. Doesn't mean they're going to stay there, but they're positive right now.
And finally, the vaccination systems are working better.
Oh,
I
that's
got my second shot today.
the vaccination. And Biden has just made a contract for 100 million of the Johnson & Johnson shots in addition to what's coming. So that the more of those shots that are a one-timer, that means that person is completely vaccinated versus the Pfizer and the Moderna. So it's coming. It's in a positive direction. Anything else anybody wants to talk about before we break up? All right, then. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you.
I'm hoping that I get a picture of my great granddaughter.
Oh, that's exciting. That's great.
Pass that around.
What is your name?
Her name is Aubrey Mary Grant DeMarco.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
I'm excited.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.